Hi everyone, so thank you for coming. So we're going to talk a little bit today about a project that the three of us here that is sat at the front have been working on, and it's integrating Alfresco with Salesforce.com. So you'll hear a lot about Salesforce over the course of the conference, I hope. This is something that specifically within engineering we've put out there. The product is called Alfresco for Salesforce. I'm going to show you a little bit about it today, show you how you can get hold of it, and what was involved in making it and putting it together over the last year or so. So my name is Will Abson. Jared Ottley is the other engineer who sat at the front here. So we worked on putting together the integration together with Greg Milan, who's the chief architect for Alfresco. The three of us have really been working on this project over the last year or so to bring this to our existing customer base. Before we get going in the presentation, we've listed this as a business track because we wanted to make sure that we get over the general concepts first. We do have some more technical details, so I just wanted to get an idea of who's maybe a technical person in the audience or who's business. So you can put your hands up for both, but perhaps anyway, if I say, well, who's a tech guy here? Okay, and who's not? Okay, so we've got a good mix. Okay, we'll try and spin it appropriately. So we've got about 40 minutes because people didn't just get downstairs from the last session. We've got a mix of slides. I'm going to do a little demo as well, so Jared's going to walk you through. That's basically the structure of the presentation. So we'll start off with business. We'll see how we do with the technical details when we get to that. So just to kick off, let's introduce the connector here. So Alfresco for Salesforce, this is an application that sits on the Salesforce.com platform predominantly. It allows any user of Salesforce to attach documents to the records that they're managing in Salesforce there. So if you've got a contract or a case or an account or an opportunity, those are the four objects that we support adding documents to. It largely it's a replacement for the out-of-the-box file upload capabilities that come with Salesforce. And the reasons why you might want to use the Alfresco connector rather than Salesforce's own, there's a number of reasons, but predominantly it's to get access to the capabilities, the broad content management capabilities that Alfresco provides. Obviously, Salesforce is more focused on the records themselves, and Alfresco can add a lot more. You can then tie into rules and workflow, renditions, and other content and services that you're not going to get from Salesforce. There's also a big business reason why you might want to use the Alfresco app, which is Salesforce actually gets very expensive when you start looking at uploading very large files. So they charge, they levy a charge based on how much content you have. If you're using this, we actually store the content in Alfresco's cloud service, and that can be synced with your on-premise install. So you're not paying such huge costs there. You're just paying the cost of that subscription. So it allows you to add documents to these items here. What you can do is then when items have been added to those objects, you can view the documents that are there. You can go over to Alfresco and see them in the Alfresco context. You can delete them. And we've also got an integration with Chatter. So Chatter is Salesforce's their social API. You probably get emails from it if you've got a Salesforce account that you've signed up for. And it sends you information about what's going on within the organization. So we've also integrated with that. So you'll see Alfresco activities actually coming through in your Chatter feed. So those are the three areas of capability that we've got. To install the app, it's actually a free app, and it's on the Salesforce AppExchange. So you can go over there and you can try it out. We support the professional and the enterprise variants of Salesforce. If you have other variants of Salesforce, then we're interested in hearing from you. So do come up and talk to us about those and tell us what your needs are. So it's on the AppExchange. If you do a search for Alfresco, basically it'll come up. It's very easy. You just click on the Get It Now button, and that'll install it into your Salesforce organization. So Jared's going to do a quick demo just to show it in action here. So that'll show installing the components and then using it as well.
All right, so we're going to go first through installing it. There's a couple paths to be able to install it. The one I took was actually going into my Salesforce organization and to go to the AppExchange. So once I go to my settings, I can go to the AppExchange Marketplace, which is just here along the left-hand side of the screen. Once we've clicked on that, it's going to load into the AppExchange. It takes a little bit of time to move on to that next phase. It usually doesn't take this long. Almost like pause. This is like a pause. Okay, here we go. All right, so loading up in the AppExchange. Then we're going to do that search that Will talked about here at the top of the screen to do this one. Now it's going to break us out of our org and actually bring us into the AppExchange. But then we'll be able to see our Alfresco for Salesforce. We'll be able to click on that, and then we'll go into the Get It Now button, which will be the next part. It is again loading into that. All right, so we're going to move over to Get It Now. Still that nice Alfresco banner in there. Part of this was that we're going to need to be able to say from the AppExchange, we're going to be able to have a system administrator permission to be able to do that. Now, when you log into your AppExchange, it's going to ask for those credentials if you already haven't done that, or if you already have, it's just going to do like a single sign-on into the AppExchange. All right. Now, it's going to give you a couple options, a couple choices to be able to where you want to install this. You can install this into a developer sandbox or into a developer edition. You can install this in production, is most likely, even if you're doing a trial. We suggest installing it into the developer trial organizations. Next, it's going to provide you some information about the package. It's free. It doesn't have a license on it, who it is that's doing it, and what edition that you're installing into. So if you're not sure of what type of edition or which version of Salesforce you have, it'll show you on that screen. We're going to go ahead and log in to our Salesforce org, and it's going to walk through the steps then of what it's going to show you when we go into this next screen, what it is that we're actually going to do, what modifications we're going to make to your organization to do that one. Try to make it as uninvasive as possible, so we're not going to try to modify too much stuff in your organization. So these are all the things that we add, class files, any of the static resources that we need as part of this, the page layouts that will need to be installed into any of those record types as part of this as well. And so we'll go ahead and we'll click Continue. And then it's going to say these are the APIs. So Alfresco needs to be able to talk back to Alfresco in the cloud. So you'll need to be able to approve the outbound connections from your Salesforce application back to that. So I was going to talk about some of the permissions that we're going to set on the objects that we're adding to that one. And this one, for the security level, I just chose the administrator because I'm just doing this as the administrator into that. And we'll go ahead and we'll click Install. This will take a little bit of time as it goes through and installs all of those objects into your system and makes the modifications. But it's fairly painless after this goes on. All right. So now that we have this in this, it's going to tell us what we've done, when it was done, when it doesn't expire. And as we go through and as new updates come out, you'll get notified that there are updates that are available, and then you could be able to install, and they'll just be pushed out to you for you to be able to take as we come across issues. The next thing you want to do is be able to configure the permissions, because we want to make sure that everybody has permission to be able to use it. There are two types of permissions, and that's when there's one for the administrator. It allows them to be able to configure the application, and the other is for the users to actually be able to use the different layouts. So I'm going to go ahead and for my user, I'm just going to add both of those to do this. Now, you don't have to do this individually. You can also bulk apply those, and there's a slide at the end that shows how to bulk apply those to the users. Next, we're going to add the Alfresco tab into it. So we'll go over to our tabs, and it's going to list all the tabs that are available. And we'll go ahead and there's the Alfresco one. We'll go to the Customize My Tabs. We'll choose Alfresco. It's going to add it to the bottom of the list. We want to move it up to the top. And you'll see as it goes up, you get a little bit of error. That error just says it can't be the first thing in the menu. So we end up being the second one. So here's our Alfresco tab. We're going to go ahead and click on the Alfresco tab, and we're going to configure the Salesforce application. On the Salesforce admin page, you'll be presented with two things after you authenticate to it. So we are using OAuth to talk back to Alfresco in the cloud. So I'll go ahead and log this into my domain, my tenant in the Alfresco cloud. And then we're going to present a list of document types. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to choose the site that's presented there, which is called DevCon. And we'll go ahead and save that. So now that we've configured, all of our content now is going to be saved into the Alfresco, into that DevCon site. Next, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our layout or create an opportunity, and then we're going to add the layout to it. So I already had an account named Summit. I'm going to fill in the basic required information for my opportunity. I'm going to save it. Now, the first time you go through, if you haven't done the layout, what you'll see is that it's not available on the page. And we're going to go quickly from this page in, and we're going to go over to edit the layout on the page. So we'll go ahead and click Edit Layout. And this is going to give us the ability to make some modifications. Of course, during this, I clicked on the wrong thing. Just Customize Layout. That's all right. You can just cancel that and go to Edit Layout. All right. So in Edit Layout, we're going to scroll down. We're going to choose the Visual Force pages. We're going to add a section. So this is a section that goes from one side of the page to the other. We're also going to make it a single column, add a new section header so everybody can be called out that this is our Alfresco portion of the page. And then we're going to add in our custom page layout into that. And I'm also going to modify the size a little bit of it. It's set at 200, and so I'm going to add it at 300. Now this is just one way of adding this, so there's also another page that already has another layout that has all of this stuff configured for you as well as part of that one. Okay. Once you're done with this, you want to make sure that you save it, otherwise it's going to go away. So we're going to save our layout, custom layout, as part of that one. And so now, when we scroll down in the page, we'll see this is our layout and be able to do this. We're going to attach a file, click the Attach File button, and we'll be able to choose a file from on our local machine, on the machine that we're on, to be able to add to to Alfresco Cloud. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose a file from the local system. We're going to choose a Word doc. We're going to change the type, the document type that comes from that list on the admin page, so you can modify or change that list to your needs. So I'm going to save that. Now this is saving that document into Alfresco. A green progress bar, upload complete, and then we're going to switch back to the page, and we'll be able to see first in our chatter feed that the item has been added, so everybody can see that notification. And then we'll see the list of documents there. So there's our document in there. Okay, so now we're going to show the document options. So there's a couple of things you can do with the document options. You can do some different sets of changes with this one. So we're going to go ahead and click on the document name. And this says the basic information, who created it, what type of document it is, how big it is, where it was at. From here, you can download the documents directly to your machine right out of Alfresco on that one, or you can choose the More Options. More Options gives you the ability to go and actually to the document detail page inside Alfresco. And this one, we're going to do edit a document. What edit a document means is that you're going to change the document. You can change the type. You can upload a new version of the document as part of that one. So it's not actually editing the document itself, but that one. To view the document, this one's taking us over to the document library. We said we could look at that More Options level, or you can click on View from that page. And View is going to take us right over into the document library. If you hadn't logged in, I'd already logged in to my cloud site. It will prompt the user for for authentication before they get into it. Now they should be able to see all the Alfresco stuff, along with metadata from whenever you synced it from Salesforce that comes over. So account information, opportunity information that you might be able to want to look at as part of the process. Okay, and our next thing, I believe that we're going to look at search. Okay, so within the Alfresco Cloud UI, you can go over to the search box, click Advanced Search. You're going to change your look for over to the CRM attachments, and then be able to put in the opportunity name, account identifier. In this case, we're going to look for Summit name, and we're going to search, and it's going to find us our document that we stored from Salesforce into Alfresco Cloud. And that's the demo portion.
Okay. Thanks, Jared. So hopefully that's given you a feeling for how you can get the app, configure it as an administrator, and then how users can actually can go in and use it themselves to upload documents and get going and get them up into cloud. I think what stands out for me there is that you can then go into share as a user who doesn't have access to Salesforce. So you can go in and you can do a search and you can find documents that relate to specific opportunities. So that, to me, is quite powerful. So that's the functionality. And we're going to focus a little bit on how we actually put the integration together. So we're going to look at what's behind the integration to start off with. Okay. So on the left-hand side, what I've drawn here is we've got the Alfresco components here. On the right-hand side, we've got the Salesforce code and configuration assets that we've built to deliver this integration. Now, there's a lot more on the right-hand side than there is on the left-hand side. We've got these boxes here on the left-hand side. What they're providing is a data model. So we've got some custom models that represent the data that's going to come over from Salesforce that you saw in the demo there. And then we've also got a small bit of configuration that sits inside of the UI layer and it enables that data to be displayed in the UI or to enable you to search using that metadata in a search form. So we've got these customizations here that are sitting in Alfresco Cloud, but they're actually really light. There's not a huge amount of code there or configuration. Really where we've done the bulk of the work is on the right-hand side there. So that's just to give you a flavor of what's sitting behind all of this. In the repository itself, in the Alfresco repository, I do just want to talk about the data model there. So this represents the entities that we've modeled. And really the key thing is that we've got this notion of a Salesforce record. So a Salesforce record was that item that you saw Jared editing on screen there. In that case, it was an opportunity, and he was adding documents to it. Now, in this case, we've got one Salesforce record, and it can have 0 or more attachments to it. So we modeled both of those entities in the Alfresco repository. There's a one-to-one mapping from the Salesforce object to this Salesforce record in the Alfresco repository, and it then has multiple relations out to these attachment objects. So we can query by that. We can also query by these specific aspects that we apply, and that's based on the type of the record that is in Salesforce there. So if it's a contract, we apply this contracts aspect, and that contains all the metadata that's relevant to a contract that we copy over into the Alfresco repository, and that's what allows us to search by that data. In addition, we have this document type aspect, and you saw Jared selecting that document type in the demo. So that also gets applied to the content. So they're applied to those attachment objects. The other thing to point out is where these are stored. So all of these items are stored in a specific site, and when the administrator configures the integration, as you saw, they nominate or they select from the drop-down which site they want to use for that purpose. That'll be in their My Alfresco cloud service. So we use this site that actually sits alongside the document library to contain these placeholder nodes. The actual attachment objects themselves sit inside the Alfresco share document library within that site in a folder called Salesforce Attachments. So it makes it really easy for users to go in and find those items. This relationship here is not actually a parent-child relationship or anything like that. This is actually a peer relationship. And what that means is you can take these attachment objects and you can move those around within the Alfresco document library. So you don't have to use the structure that we use. We basically have this Salesforce attachments folder, and then we create a subfolder that's based on the name of the Salesforce record, and we just dump the documents into there. But you can apply names, policies, whatever you like that moves those around based on your business needs, and that association will still be preserved. So that's really what we have on the Alfresco side. Now, when we install the package, we need to think about the packaging. Your Alfresco, the Alfresco cloud administrators have installed these 2 AMP files, and that contains the custom repository configuration, the model, and such like, and the UI configuration. On the Salesforce side, the application is also packaged up in the AppExchange. The question mark is to note the fact that we don't know and we don't care how that's packaged up because that's managed by Salesforce. What they do allow us to do that's important, as Jared says, is they allow us to make updates to that configuration and to that code. So we can push those out to users. Say if we have a security issue that we need to fix, we can push that straight out automatically to users of the application. So that's a bit of background. Now, how does it actually work in practice? So if you look at these entities here, what we've got is we've got some Salesforce users here. They interact with Salesforce through their web browser. That connects to Salesforce. And then we've got Alfresco Cloud down here. Now, the cloud service stores the documents in these folders. And the way it does that is using this OAuth layer for authentication, that Jared mentioned. And in order to actually store the documents, look them up, delete them, or update them, we're using the CMIS integration that is built into my Alfresco. So that's part of the Alfresco public API. Now, the reason why there's so little components sitting here, as I mentioned, there's just some model and some lightweight configuration, is because we're using these APIs that were already there. So we're using that support that was already built into Alfresco Cloud. So that's really, really light here. We're just using CMIS to do that communication back to Alfresco from the Salesforce code. We also use a standard called CORS, and that allows us to do the uploads, and it enables us to bypass some of the limits that Salesforce have built into their system. This is all completely transparent to the user, so all they see is the document gets uploaded. But behind the scenes, we're using this CORS standard to do that. Okay. So when a user downloads a file, the steps, I won't read through the steps automatically, but the first thing that we need to do is make sure that the user is authenticated to Alfresco. OAuth tokens, because that's what we're using for authentication, they can expire. So we need to check that they're valid. Then all we do is we pull down the document. We make a call back to Alfresco from Salesforce to retrieve that document, and we stream that back to the user. There is an exception case. If the document's not found, we have to handle that gracefully and return them a 404 page. So that's pretty simple stuff. That's downloading. I mentioned uploading, and this is slightly more complex, but again, it's transparent to the user, as I said. And that walks through exactly how that happens, the different communication between the 3 agents involved there. Okay. So we've been uploading documents, we've been downloading documents, we can do all of that. And that's all been directly accessing the Alfresco Cloud API from the Salesforce code, and the content is in the Alfresco Cloud. But I think one of the unique features that we can take advantage of that's in Alfresco is this sync that we have, this hybrid sync that operates between our on-premise installation of Alfresco and the My Alfresco instance, the cloud service that's sitting up there. And what the sync capabilities that are built in allow us to do is we can say that we want to pull those Salesforce attachments, we want to pull them down into the organization. So I mentioned these users who may not have access to Salesforce. Think of those as these guys. They don't have access to Salesforce. They may not even have direct access to the Alfresco cloud. But what they can do is they can go to their local Alfresco installation. The content is behind the firewall, and they can access it there just using their Alfresco login. So we can take advantage of some of the capabilities that are just built into Alfresco there. That's actually quite unique because we're taking advantage of the fact that Alfresco Cloud is out there in the open and Salesforce is able to communicate backwards and forwards from it. But using that, we can then push the content back into the organization as well.
If we don't have a firewall, is it possible to connect directly on-premise Alfresco to the Salesforce?
Yeah, the question was, how do you connect? How does the cloud connect to the on-premise Alfresco?
No, the other way. If you don't have a cloud subscription and you have a public Alfresco server, can you have the module Salesforce connect directly to your Alfresco server?
So that's not something we support today. We have had discussions around that. What we needed to make some modifications to the cloud product.
Right. So what you're basically doing is you're putting all of your contacts potentially to the Alfresco.
Could you please repeat the question? Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that the same question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. So
yeah.
It was a loud mic. So there's a potential information leak, right? Already you've got your potential and current customers in Salesforce, right? So that's a whole level of risk. And then now you've moved that data also to the Alfresco cloud, which is another level of risk, right? So now all of your customers are listed in Salesforce on the cloud. Now they're in the Alfresco cloud as well. And so now there's two external companies that have that information.
Yeah.
And removing that seems worthwhile.
I guess that's not the challenge we're trying to address here. I guess
Sure.
We're trying to make this information available to people who are on premise who might not have.
Which is awesome, but
Yeah.
Just add one thing. At the beginning, there was a brief mention of Dreamforce. There was a brief mention at the beginning through that banner of Dreamforce. So we're going to be at Dreamforce, which is the big Salesforce conference next week, and they'll be talking about some opportunities for accessing on-prem data from as well. So just stay tuned. I don't want to give you too much more information, but there's some capabilities that they're going to make available from the Salesforce platform to get at on-prem environments as well.
Okay. If there's any other questions, can we just take those at the end of the presentation?
I can do it at the end, whatever. Okay. Yeah, my understanding was that if there was custom metadata up in the Alfresco cloud or other types of metadata that the current configuration it didn't all flow down to the on-premise, is there a plan to change that in future releases, or is that the way it currently works?
So we push down the document content and the core metadata about that document. What we don't do today is the domain-specific properties that I talked about. So the stuff that you saw Jared searching for, say customer name. We're not pushing that down to the on-prem Alfresco, and that's really, it's not possible to do that. That's really a product management decision in terms of how to focus that. We can do that. So if you're interested in that, then it's definitely having a word with.
Integrator or a technical person could physically do that. It's just you haven't made that into the product.
So the follow-up was, can an integrator do that? Well, actually, they can't do that right now because the models aren't actually part of Alfresco Enterprise. So yeah, they'd have to wait for us to merge those into the mainstream enterprise product. But as I say, it's definitely something we can do if people are interested in that. Okay. So I'm going to just hand over to Jared just to discuss some of the details, further details of the integration.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about building on Salesforce. As Will showed out in that one diagram, the majority of the work is all on the Salesforce side. And so that has us use two different things. It's called Apex, which is the language that they use for developing applications. I have 10 minutes, good. All right. And then there's Visualforce, which handles the visual layout of stuff, which is similar to Cold Fusion or JSP or JSF kind of tagging of information, XML-based one. Apex is a Java-based. It was based off of the Java 1.5 release. So there's some similarities between Java and that one. And each of those talk back and forth. So from the browser talks into the Visualforce layer or presented through the Visualforce layer, and the Visualforce layer then talks back to the Apex stuff. And that's the model that we're using as part of this one. What this diagram doesn't show is that you can also expose either through using Salesforce's own SOAP or REST-based APIs, or you can create your own using Apex to be able to do the stuff. Apex also allows you to even be able to tag or annotate a method to be able to expose it to the Visualforce page. So in your JavaScript, you would do on your Visualforce page, you would be able to access that Apex code. And we do some of that within our product. Now, some of the things that we ran into, and this is more for the technical crowd, so if your eyes glaze over, I'm okay with that. Some of the challenges that we ran into working with the CMIS API. First off, there's no CMIS client in Apex. Force.com doesn't have a concept of libraries, so if you have an additional set of functionality that you want to be able to add, your options are to either write it yourself or look for a third-party application that may have it, or other code that might have it. People might make available other code to be able to do that. There are some limitations to each of those. One is that if you do have to write it, you're responsible for maintaining all of that, which is what the approach that we've taken. If you were to use a third-party application, you're then limited by what APIs they expose, or if any changes that they make, those will automatically be pushed down on you. So you have a chance that things might break. Or if you use someone else's code to go into that one, Salesforce has a limit on the amount of code that you can add. So 5-10 megs of code that you can add into your library. And then you're also responsible for testing and maintaining tests. Salesforce has a strict 75% code coverage if you're doing applications that you have to have before you can publish that code. So you have to have at least 75% of any of your custom code that you've written covered by tests as part of that one. And then we'll talk about the endpoints and the governance limits as we go throughout this one. Next is we need to be able to get the tenant ID. CMIS doesn't have a concept of having this tenant or this object that has or contains everything, your network that you're going to go into cloud. And so we had a couple of options. One is that the user provides that information. In that case, we might run into a risk of them mistyping or misspelling what that is, or not knowing what their tenant ID may be. Hopefully they don't, or hopefully they do know what it is. And the next is use the REST API portion. So our public API is divided into a couple different sections. One is the CMIS APIs. The other is the REST APIs. And we're using the REST API to be able to do that one. Now that Apex does provide a JSON parser that you'll be able to do that one, but you also have to then go in and create objects, Apex classes, to be able to represent those for the JSON parser. And in our JSON structures that we return back, some of the words that we use in those objects or in those JSON objects are also reserved words in Salesforce. And so we have to go through, when we get that raw JSON, go through and modify those strings so that we'll be able to do that one. It also means that once we have the JSON, if we're doing this automatically, we're limited to being able to discover what network it is that they want to be able to use, because they might have been invited into multiple networks. So in this case, what we're doing is we're looking for their home network, or what we could do is present them a list of networks that are available and allow them to be able to choose that one. So we're just defaulting right now to be able to take what is their home network to be able to do that one. Next, CMIS is very verbose. If you want to learn how CMIS cannot be verbose, I recommend going to Greg's talk on the JSON bindings, which is, I think, super exciting. But that's because I'm a geek. And you can reduce some of the verbosity of the CMIS by using filters to be able to get just the properties, look at the properties that you want to be able to use. Using CMIS, because it is so verbose, we're bumping up against the governance limits, the limits that that Salesforce puts upon any of their applications. 5 bits. An example of this is Alfresco.com. The Alfresco site list is 400 plus sites, and it's growing. Even if I complain about it a lot, it doesn't make any difference. And so at the time that I ran a test with this 400 plus sites, the size of that CMIS return was about 2.5 megs. And we only have within Salesforce about, I think it's 5 megs, 6 megs to be able to work with on those documents. So a couple of options that we have are to be able to introduce some paging to be able to do that. One of the things that we need to be able to look at, or switching over to use the browser bindings, which then puts us into the browser and not on the Salesforce platform directly, and we get around those ones. We're going to skip parsing XML because we only have a couple of minutes. Child objects within CMIS is the same sort of thing. You have to make multiple calls out, which then hits us against some of the limits. Delete. It's not as exciting. Secondary types. Got 4 minutes. Site folders. Right now, one of the issues that we ran into was with site folders with localization. Thanks. Is that the names, because we want things to be available immediately, and we don't want to have that eventuality. Whenever we're doing a querying for those things, we need to be able to look at the path directly of the named objects. And localization then changes that. So whenever a person creates a site, if their locale is not English, or their locale, the language that, the strings that we use that match what the site object would be would end up being different. And there was a bug in that. It's currently in there, but it's been fixed. We'll fix that. And we're just waiting for a QA time to be able to push that fix out. If you're developing against cloud, one of the things that's very helpful is being able to have a node browser. If you've done any local development against Alfresco, what we've used is the CMIS Workbench to be able to do that. It uses it as a node browser, and you can use OAuth tokens. This is a configuration that you can use to be able to configure against that one, to use that. Governance limits. So this one I thought these are the ones that I think that are important. There are a whole list of these that are more that you can do. So we have a heap size. This is per transaction, so 6 megabytes. So any operation that we do within a single transaction from a user pressing a button to do something, we only have 6 megs to do that. There's also a file size limit that goes along with that one. So you can only put files into Salesforce that are 5 megs or lower. So if we were uploading a document into Salesforce and then passing that over to that one, we've already used up 5 of our 6 megs just for storing the file in memory. And then you also have to add on top of that any of the headers that might be a part of that process of uploading. And then we only have a limited amount of space then to use for things like authentication as part of that one. So this really kind of helps by moving your files out, allows you to be able to do more within those transactions. Using cores as part of that to be able to do those file transfers, so allowing the browser to do that one. We also have only a limited number of call-outs that we can make within that one. So that's one of the things that when you start using it, you'll notice that there's only 5 files that are listed per page within the component, and that's because of the limit that we have on call-outs that we can make within that one. If you're building an application against Salesforce and you're looking to go into AppExchange, there's some security considerations that you have to go into is being able to understand or go through the process, this review process with them. It can take up to 8 weeks. If you come back and you will fail the first time that you submit one of these, everybody does. When you go back to do that one, you go back to the end of the queue, and you have another 6 to 8 weeks to wait before you get any information. Go through the review process again, which is one of the reasons why it took so long, even though we talked about this last year at DevCon. Some future ideas that we have for the integration. Greg's talked a little bit about that one. We'll talk about some of that at Dreamforce this next week. We're looking at maybe using something like the Salesforce Canvas framework or an HTML5 type app that we can use that will help us get around those governance limits, which put a big hamper and a wrench into any of the work that we have to do as part of that one. For those of you who might be looking at this and have multiple users, I've added in a couple slides of how you can add or script in assigning those permission sets for users to be able to use. And links to documentation. Documentation is freely available. You can just go to the AppExchange site. There's a download link that you can click to be able to get to that one. And then that's the actual listing for the Salesforce for the AppExchange. I don't think we have any time. That's the end. If you have any questions about Salesforce and how it works, or if you're using Salesforce and are interested, and we'd love to be able to hear from you to be able to learn more how you're using it, so we can plan out what the future might hold for this.
Thank you. Thank you for. Thank you for your good talk. I have a question about Salesforce. Can we have multiple sites linked to Salesforce?
Right now, it's one site, so you choose one site, and that one site is used for everything. But because, as Will explained, you can move those, you can move that record. We tested that, right? Moving a record from one site to another site. So you could have a site that collects all of them, and then have rules that allow you to be able to move them to other sites within.
Yeah, think of that site as the site where content lands initially, and you can always move it out as long as the users who are using it have permission on both sites.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
That's one.
So if you want to track sharing documents, so if you have internal documents that you want to share with customers, it seems like it would be useful to have that in Alfresco moving into Salesforce. So it's sort of the other way.
Yeah. So we've I don't know how much we can say. We've tested that. So we've tested that. Salesforce is looking at that sort of thing, and we've been involved with them. And I've done a POC about how that works. So the future is be announced next week. But we've done that sort of work. It's possible. Yeah. Yes.